Hello and welcome to the Navy Blue Corner. I'm Ian, joined as always by my good mate Lockie. And the Blues have lost by 14 points at home to Port Adelaide after winning 5 games in a row, Lockie, and looking like a premiership fancy. The Blues have now lost 3 of our last 4 after sitting pretty in that second spot for 6 weeks. We now find ourselves clinging on to a top 4 spot and potentially even a top 8 spot. Missing out is not out of the question. It all feels very doom and gloom in the community right now. So, Lockie, how are you feeling about it all? And what did you make of the loss against Port?
I'm probably not going to do the best job at pulling us out of that doom and gloom today. I'm not feeling the most chipper after this month of footy. I'm keen to do our regular therapy after a loss, though. But yeah, not a whole lot to be excited about at the moment.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with you. It's going to be very difficult to stay positive with what we're seeing currently. And my mood around these games really fluctuated quite a lot. The siren goes and it wasn't anger. It was just disappointment, as I feel like a parent would always say to you. It's that. And then, Saturday morning rolls around and it was just anger. It was exactly that. It was just that frustration of the opportunity. And it feels like we're dropping right now and not maybe having that clear view of how to fix it because it's extended for so many weeks now. Another day we're recording this Sunday night and that anger has disappeared again and it is just gone back to disappointment. So you're probably not going to get me as ranty as you would have if we recorded Saturday morning. But yeah, definitely not positive at all. So Lockie, I guess, what was your key kind of takeaways from this game? They're very negative, but I was trying to think of what can we potentially learn from this game, if there's anything, or did you find that it was much to the same from last month?
Oh, it's a really tough question. I've been on a similar roller coaster to you where during the first half, so I guess going into halftime, I was thinking to myself, wow, I'm very impressed with how we're going. And then by the end of the game, I was like, well, that was obviously disappointing, but didn't feel that bad. That's how I was feeling. Watching the replay this morning, that first half was not as good as I remembered. And that second half was far worse than even I felt in the moment. Watching it it's hard not to have bias when you know that we're going to lose and watch the game back. But there was, I can't believe this sentence is going to come out of my mouth, but there was so little for me to like watching the replay. So it's like, where do you really want to begin with issues? Because yeah, I guess there isn't really anything new apart from no Harry, no Akers. The guys out just exposed even more holes than before.
Yeah, well, I actually wanted to ask that question as well. So maybe we'll lead off with that because I've seen this get thrown around and I want to know your thoughts on it. Did we lose this game simply because we were missing some key players? Obviously, Harry is that laid out. We know how big he is for structure. Lewis Young comes into the lineup. And is that enough time to truly plan and get the right attack when, the league is so close right now? So not having a guy like Harry, DeConing, Akers, you can throw them into it, plus the 5-day break. Yeah. Were those some of the key reasons why we lost this, or are you one not to be making those kind of excuses?
Well, I mean, like I said, there wasn't really much for me to like at all. There was so many ways that this broke down. So I'm just adding that to the mix. Like, it felt like we were playing as if Harry was out there. The way that we were trying to move the ball and put it inside 50 was as if he was there. So I'm not going to pretend that we're not a better side without, one of our best players. But I don't spend a lot of time reading through Twitter replies and things like that. But people saying that we lost the game at selection, I completely disagree with that. I think if you want to say that we, the fact that those guys weren't there played a big role, I think that's true. But come on, I can't see any way that we could have picked that team based on who was injured that would have made a massive difference, personally.
Yeah, I definitely will not say that is the reason why we lost. Thought I would throw it out there and see if you got really heated on it because I know I am. I look, clearly not having those guys, they're key to structure. It's not going to make you a
Yeah.
better team, not having them out there. And you saw, particularly in that second half, when we needed to go long down the line. And that's where Harry is, to be that target. You're clearly going to be worse off from a scoring point of view, not having that second ruck really working. I know Lewis Young was sort of thrown into there. Probably not going to get the same output as you would a Harry, and then just not having that mobile tool to stretch the opposition, get the space in behind for others, not be that target when you just need a big, strong contested mark. However, that was not the reason why we lost that game. We were 31 points up. We had an opportunity to win that game. We defended well enough, I would say, for enough of that game. We kept Port Adelaide to only 79 points. If you told me before the game, hey, Port Adelaide are going to score 79 points in this game, I would have been licking my lips thinking, you beauty, we've won this. Because I know it's not the beautiful hashtag 75 that we like. It's close enough, though, and Port can score on you. So I would have been pretty positive. But for me, where we lost this game, it comes down to the midfield. Number one, that was where it's happening again. We're not getting enough out of anyone that isn't Patrick Cripps. We get George Hewitt back and he was serviceable. I don't think that he's anywhere near the problem. But past those guys, who is it? Walshy down on form so much right now. Didn't throw Cherry into that at all. He was playing a halfback role. Kennedy wasn't thrust into there. If your number two right now is George Hewitt, you're probably not going to win a premiership. And that's not trying to be harsh on George Hewitt, but his role is not to be your number two best midfielder. It's meant to be a guy like a Sam Walsh, that more explosive type. If we've only got two guys that are absolutely flying right now, it's just not enough. I guess, how did you see the midfield, and is that something that you are diagnosing as one of the clear issues as we go through this last month?
Definitely. It definitely is the midfield. I'd go as far as to say it's anything that's happening between the arcs for me. Because, as I said, watching the replay back, it wasn't just the midfielders that were culprits in this with poor offense and I guess not fantastic defense either, but it was our forwards when we're coming up the ground, turning around, and what's our play? Sit it straight into Aaliyah's hands seemingly every fucking time. Like the fact that we never seem to be able to learn from that and try different things in that regard was just crazy to me. How we just continue to sit it on Fogarty's head against two opponents. And that's midfielders, that's guys getting up the ground. It's the midfield discussion is hard for me though, because it's like I have nothing for you in terms of turning that around.
Look, I don't either. And clearly the coaches are struggling with it as well, which is something that I will touch on a little bit later. But I guess all we can really do is diagnose the problem and tell you what the problem is. And right now, I mean, look at just the score sources. From stoppage, it was 15 to 44, negative 29. This is meant to be our bread and butter, scoring from stoppages, winning it at the heat of the battle. And then center bounces again. We did not score a single point from center bounces. Port Adelaide scored 12 points. That's horrific from us. Yeah, we started to get that little bit of turnover game, won that 43 to 29. So we're plus 14 in turnover. Doesn't seem like we're able to at the moment get both of those right at the same time. That was almost the issue earlier on in the season. Yeah, the turnover looked great. Stoppages was bad. We finally sort of got it the other way and we started to win games of football. Now that it's turned again, all of a sudden we are losing again. And just looking at some of the other things, I mean, it was the lowest center clearance numbers for the year. We only won 6 center clearances for the game. And the lowest center clearance differential for the year at -7. And one center clearance was won, Lockie, in the second half of this game. When the game was there to be won, couldn't get our hands on it, which is crazy as well, just to throw some more stats at you out of nowhere. When we actually had our second highest contested possession count for the season at 154. We won contested possessions by 15. But in the end, maybe a stat that shows you controlled a bit more of the ball, the uncontested numbers. We lost that by 23 and had our lowest uncontested possession count for the year at 171. So, I mean, what do you kind of make of those numbers, and what are you seeing as potentially some of those issues in the midfield? Is it personnel? Is it the way we're kind of setting up? Where are you seeing the problems lying in that midfield?
Yeah, I mean, I am going to be like you and just put my diagnosis hat on. Like, it's not surprising at all to me that the scores that came from centre bounce our way, like, how are we going to score with a rushed center clearance high sitting on top of our forwards' heads? Like, that was never going to work. Your comment about not getting our hands on it, something that I was noticing a lot was we were in a lot of center bounces getting our hands to it and then handballing it to the opposition, or getting our hands on it again, tackling it, spilling out, and them taking it away. So, there's something there as well. I mean, yeah, I don't even know where to go with that. I don't want to talk. I don't want it to be personnel, because where do you go if it's that? It feels like it has to be tactical things.
And that's the crazy thing, because there's some players out of form. However, we kind of don't have a lot of other options to throw in there right now. You're looking at Cripps, obviously, Walsh, Hewitt. You can throw Chera. Chincotta was in there a little bit, tagging Butters. Like, our best players are out there on the park. We've seen multiple different variations of it, even without De Koning there, work from the last few years. So clearly, like you're saying there, it's possible and it can turn around. That's the glass half full look at it. We know it can work because we've seen it. How it's working and what's going wrong, I have no idea why we're leaking so much from this, and what has shifted over the last month, where we were winning it from these sources. We were looking impressive. I know we've been talking a little bit about have teams like put in the work and found us out, but I think you just have to be better than that from a coaching point of view and personnel, where you should always be evolving and assuming that opposition are going to find ways to nullify what you're doing. So how are you continually evolving what you're attempting out there? And for whatever reason, right now, it's not working. And how does that turn around? I don't know, but it has to right now.
Yeah. I mean, the podcast is forcing me to be glass half full, as it always does. In terms of the centre bounce and stoppage things, is there anything in, like, needing continuity with Pitto and the mids? Like, is there a lack of synergy there that could come? Because we know that Pitt can be good in this department when he's in form and he's rolling. Like, is that something that you think that could just improve with games?
I mean, I think it can. I don't necessarily think that was the glaring issue. I don't think Pitternet was good on the Friday night. Thought he was pretty poor. Sweet just outbodied him the whole time. Which is probably that really frustrating element when, if you're looking at bringing in Pitto, say, for this game, taking away the injury of De Koning, you would go, okay, well, at least he's going to have the body to go up against someone like Jordan Sweet. Unfortunately, just got monstered by him. So if Pitto's strength is that toughness, is having that bigger body, and that's not working for you, then what else are you doing? Thought he had a poor night. My bigger issue, I think, from this game and trying to diagnose it, looking a bit deeper, and this is probably goes towards a bit more of the coaching that I want to get to in a bit of a different segment. However, what changes are we making in here? Cripps has 22 of the centre bounces, Walsh 18, Hewitt 16. The next one from that was Chincotta at 7, who was tagging.
Yeah.
Carroll has 3, Chera has 3, Kennedy has 2, Elijah Hollins has 1. I don't understand why at any stage throughout that, particularly in the second half, we didn't go, okay, Chera, here you go. Okay, Kennedy, you've been one of the handful of players that have been amazing for us tonight and has been really solid over the last month when everyone else has been absolute dog shit. Here you go, mate. Go in there. I'm baffled why we didn't seem to really shift anything, and we kind of kept going with what didn't work. I think that was my kind of key takeaway on all of this, was definition of insanity. Felt like every component of this game, it was, let's continue the same thing we've done for the past month that hasn't worked. never make any alterations, and get the same result. And that's probably where my disappointment and just overall negative attitude on Carlton right now really stems from, not seeing anything different.
Well, so what was your vibe like at halftime? How did you find your feelings went throughout the game?
Yeah, I guess probably quarter time thought we started really, really well, but just didn't put the score on the board when we probably should have. Second quarter obviously was really, really good. And I think the positive overall, and probably still for the 4 quarters, was I thought our pressure was back. That was the really exciting thing to see, that wasn't there for the last month. Pressure around everywhere, tackling, the desire to want to win the ball seemed like it was improving. And in the second quarter, that's what sparked the crowd into it, being at the ground. We weren't getting excited just for the ball going through the big sticks. It was the smothers, the second efforts, the halving contests we shouldn't be halving. That's what we were getting excited about. Mitch McGovern was doing so much of it. That was the impressive thing. So halftime, I was positive, definitely thinking, okay, wasn't the most perfect half of football, but we're starting to get our game back. However, I did say at halftime to my sister and my girlfriend that I was watching the game with, I said, look, Port are going to tighten up. They're not going to allow Charlie to have as much space. Wouldn't surprise me if they really clamp down on that. It's just going to be a massive contested slog from here on out. We just have to grind the game out. And even in that third quarter, I thought, look, Port got on top, but we managed to get close to halving it. It was just like, okay, we've just got to go big in that last quarter. Ultimately, we then had probably one of the worst quarters I've seen us play in quite a while for a multitude of reasons. But I guess at halftime, I was positive. But at the end of the day, 1.5 quarters is not going to be enough to win you games of footy against teams vying for top 8. And it's not good enough to keep you in the top 4.
Yeah. I agree with that sentiment, I guess, and the point I was trying to get to was, like, would you have been making any changes at halftime, moving magnets, or it was going fine at that stage?
I think the only thing I would have maybe looked at a little bit more would have been the back line, because I think that one of the big issues we had, which was smart from Hinkley, smart from Port, hey, Radaglia, go down forward. And the Kemp matchup was clearly not working, and it's nothing on Kemp. What can he do? He's giving up so many centimeters, so many kilos on a guy like that. Why not throw Lewis Young and then have Kemp forward? Guys probably had some experience there as well. When Harry was the laid out, I thought that was the obvious maneuver. When it looked like Lewis Young was going to play forward, I still understood it, because I thought, okay, well, maybe we don't want to be too tall down back. We don't want 3 big key defenders. I can understand it.
Yeah.
But you have a half of football where the only, Georgiades is a good footballer, but Charlie Dixon's doing absolutely nothing. Radaglia, who's not a good footballer, is starting to get a handle on a matchup. Should you just shift it there and then allow, I guess, Kemp, because he's a bit more mobile, to try and stretch the opposition a little bit more, something that probably is just not in Lewis Young's wheelhouse?
Yeah, no, that's sensible. And I think it's okay to have a discussion about that. For me, I think we did do the right thing. Like, that continuity piece between Weeder and Kemp and McGovern, to me, is just so important. Like, how they elevate each other down there. So that's, I can understand your rationale for that. It's that continuity versus, optimizing. Because with the midfield, they've clearly gone the continuity route, and it's not working.
What did you make, talking about maybe some changes that happened after halftime? Cincotta was clamping down on Butters. Things were looking pretty good. Midfield was still tracking okay at this stage. What did you make of him switching who he was playing on, going to a more Houston, I think it was, at least for a little bit of that third, and all of a sudden Butters comes to life? How did you see that kind of match up, and I guess what we're doing with Cincotta right now?
That's a really good question. I feel like this has happened a few times recently where he's been doing a good job on someone, and then we've made the moves. One of the things or coaching suggestions I kind of remarked on to myself in the lead up to this game was, I would actually like to see Chincotta having some centre bounces on Butters and seeing if we can nullify there, and then it's Cripps and Walsh, or it's Cripps and Hewitt versus Wines and Rosie, and let's see if we can win that kind of 2-on-2 battle more. So I was kind of happy to see that rather than the old Chincotta running off somewhere to meet with Butters, which sometimes didn't work. So yeah, I thought that was positive, and he wasn't having the impact when Chincotta was on him. I often hear commentators remark on things like this, where a player is getting tagged, and obviously when you tag someone, it means other players have a bit more freedom and they do well. And then commentators say, "Oh, why are they tagging this guy? He's having hardly any impact. They should move him to this guy." Yeah, that's because he's getting
doing
tagged.
his job.
That's the point. So I wouldn't have changed it up.
Yeah, I thought that was a bad move, clearly, and in the end, it probably shows that way. I guess just to rattle off the midfield discussion, what do you make of Sam Walsh at the moment? I don't mean this to be a pile-on personal attack, single out one player, because we love Walshy. We want him to get back to his best. Unfortunately, when he's meant to be our second best midfielder and no one else is kind of stepping up to this, if Walsh was playing the way he is currently, but a Chera was stepping up, or maybe they were throwing a Kennedy through the midfield and everything's still working, you wouldn't be talking about it as much. But Walshy's past month has been really, really poor. And right now we need our top three midfielders to be firing if we want to win a flag. What are you seeing with Sam Walsh? What's not working? Or do you disagree? Do you think he's playing okay?
I don't disagree. I've felt like this for a bit of time. I wonder whether like our method, our strategy, and those things is like plays to his strengths. I guess that's maybe the question that I'd put out there to the people. I thought there was a number of times in this game where Cripps, who sometimes is someone that people don't regard as a great kick, was making really sensible decisions to lower his eyes and not make reckless decisions. For me, I don't see that enough from Walshy. Like, it's just he gets him. He obviously is always getting the ball. He's always getting himself in positions to be able to have offensive impact, but it doesn't happen often enough. 11 tackles, you can't deny his effort or anything like that. But the output that we get from, like you said, if we want to be a premiership side, our second best mid has to be elite. It's just not coming.
Yeah. And it's good that he's getting those 11 tackles. That's a positive. But he's not the guy I necessarily want to be getting 11 tackles. I don't want him to be that big defensive midfielder. What Walshy's in the team for is the offensive part of the game. And when that's not there, it's hard to really look positively on his performance. And is it all down to, and this might be a little bit silly, but the new holding the ball interpretation change? Because ever since then, I don't think I've ever seen a man get caught holding the ball more every time he picks it up. Opposition know to chicken wing him, and he doesn't seem to have that awareness to just drop the ball. Because if you do it straight away, regardless of if it hits your foot or not, umpire cannot pay holding the ball because you haven't had prior yet. Seems to be taking too many steps when he gets it. He tries to take on an extra player with the fend off that used to work so well, but now that rule's changed, it's getting caught that way. And then, like you say, I think one of the bigger issues on top of that is when he is getting the ball, he's just not making the right decision. So do you think the holding the ball rule change has been a big player in this? And then I guess on top of that, my bigger overall question is, do we need to start maybe shifting his role around? Would you like to see him maybe spend some time on the wing? That way he maybe, and I know this is maybe not the most ideal solution because midfield's not working. Taking out your supposed second best midfielder feels like the wrong move, but would this allow a bit more freedom? Him on the outside, less pressure on him. Can we expose teams in a different way and maybe get him off the leash that way?
Yeah, I don't mind that idea. I guess we're in a period where we have to try something like that. The holding the ball thing, it's clear to me that he does get a lot of those paid. I haven't kind of noticed it in terms of the rule change necessarily, but I don't know. I don't know whether I want him just try to chuck it on the boot for a meaningless kick in those times. Like I don't know. That's a really hard one. I guess it's Is there defined, or should there be? Is there defined enough roles for the guys in the midfield? And should there be like they, like, do we want Walshy getting in and getting himself in those situations, or do you want him to be more, just the outside kind of guy?
Well, I think he can do both, but his strength is clearly meant to be that positive element. I guess where I'm looking at this is if our midfield isn't working with the personnel that's there, should we just try to shift and change something? Doesn't have to mean this is what we're doing for every single centre bounce, every single minute of the game, but why not for 10, 15 minutes, try something? If we're not feeling as if that positive element of Walsh's game is there, and maybe an Ollie Hollins is getting beaten on the wing with a bit of physicality, why not pull a lever and say, okay, Walsh, here's 10 minutes on the wing. Now you can maybe have a bit more run around from the stoppage on the outside. We can try to unleash you this way because you're probably going to be the best winger in the AFL if you're out there because you are one of the best midfielders in the comp. This way you have a little bit more freedom. And then does that also alleviate the where the hell do we put Chera problem? Because it seems as if we can't play Chera and Walsh in the midfield at the same time. Not having Walsh in there potentially gives you Chera, which could be something. I know Chera's not in the best form and we're all calling for him not to be in the midfield. You have one bad game with everyone else. He's not in there. So you say, okay, Chera back in the midfield as if that's going to solve all the problems. So I'm aware of that. However, if they're going to persist playing Chera in the side just for the sake of it right now, it does letting these guys rotate on the wing and in the midfield just give you a different look. Because, again, that was probably the most frustrating part. We just didn't try anything different.
Yeah. No, I think that's all really sensible. I mean, I feel pretty confident that Boyd, Sard, Newman, like that's the halfback combination that it can take us there. I don't necessarily see us in the grand final having Chera back there. We spoke about it in previous weeks. Like, is this the chance for him to get some form and get some confidence? And I thought it would, but I don't think it has.
Yeah, doesn't seem like it has. My next question, which we've danced around a little bit, but I really want to get your thoughts on this. Trying to, again, diagnose what's not going right at this very moment. Is it bad players or bad coaching, Lockie?
Why do you have to ask it in such a simple way? That makes it harder to sit on the fence.
Because I want to make it nice and clickbaity for everyone out there. Because, and look, you can definitely fence it on this. It was more just a question to throw out there. In right now, what's the issue? Are we putting it down to players not executing? Is it down to coaches? What are you seeing? What's not working for either? Let's try and have this kind of debate, looking at all angles.
Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, you can look at it holistically and you can drill it down. As I was watching the replay this morning, there was a passage of play where we transitioned the ball well to maybe 70 meters out and always had the ball. And we had a few players loose in the middle of the ground, right? And then we had our options deep and it was a 3-on-2 to Port Adelaide. Him deciding to kick that long down the forward throw, how do you know if that is his decision based on, what he thinks is the best option or whether that's instruction from coaching? I can't tell you what that is, which it is.
No, I can't either. And look, I'll be honest, I'm not decided one way or the other. It was just a really good way to me to talk about a few of the little things I have here in my run check. So I want to talk about coaching first and foremost. I think that's where my frustration is the most from this game. And it's the same issues are there. We don't seem to be trying anything different. There's no creative solutions to anything right now. As I said, we didn't try to change up the midfield when it wasn't working. And I guess you can talk about that ball movement. And is this a player thing? Is it a coaching thing? But what are we attempting to do here? We're pushing Charlie into defense. We're throwing Lewis Young into defense.
Mm-hmm.
Seemingly, the players are continually going slow, going long down the line, making that decision.
Yeah.
Is that on them? Is that on the coaching? Because when they're doing it, now you're kicking it to Motlop and Fogarty. There's no tools down there, turning the ball over every 2 seconds. I mean, what's happening?
Exactly. My thoughts exactly.
And I think the other part of the coaching that's, I guess, the worrying component when I'm looking at oppositions, and every single week when we do build up shows, when I'm trying to figure out where the game needs to be won, I'm constantly thinking about opposition players and going, we need to stop this player. God, Houston off the halfback, Bailey Dale, these kind of players, we've got to watch out for them. Why do we seem like we're the only team in the AFL that can't utilize our most dangerous weapons? Looking at, obviously this week we don't have Harry, but Harry and Charlie, we seem to be the only team that, with the 2 best key forwards in the competition, still can't get the forward line functioning so perfectly where they're getting silver service every single week, out in space, completely dominating, stretching the opposition. It still feels like there's so many 2-on-1s, and other teams' defenders, even if they're good or not, seem to be able to nullify their influence to the degree where we're still not happy with the overall output. And then overall in this, we've got one of the best running halfbacks in the competition. Do we ever see Adam Sard off the leash? Why is every other team in the competition, even if you put a tag on them, why do they still dominate us, but we can never seem to unleash Sard? Seems like the most obvious weapon, particularly in a game like this where we cannot move the ball from D50.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something we've been calling out for a long time, like how we can't find a better way to get the ball into our good kickers' hands. Both of those are complete conundrums to me. I mean, everyone knows what Charlie and Harry's different strengths are and the way that we can play it best for them. And the amount of times that Charlie's in a one-on-one contest with an intercept defender with the ball kicked on his head, and he'll mark it occasionally, he'll get a free kick occasionally, but it's just not how we're supposed to utilize him. So is it coaching, or is it where the players I wish we could just be within the 4 walls and understand those conversations, because
no, there's so many bad coaching decisions as far as little matchups here and there, changing things that were working, not changing what wasn't working. And ball movement was clearly almost 1 and 2 with midfield as far as reasons we lost that game. Put ourselves in a winnable position at halftime, still well and truly winnable at 3/4 time. But ball movement was the real issue, and what stopped us from winning in that last quarter. Looking at it from a coaching point of view, and I feel like a broken record, which is my problem with this episode, and what I hope is not just us repeating ourselves like we have been for the past month, but something as simple as kick-ins, Lockie. Why are we the only team that can't figure out kick-ins? Every team we come up against find a way to get the ball out and onto the wing pretty easily. We never seem to be able to do it. Every single time the ball goes through for a point, it's take your time, get to the edge of the square, either kick short and then launch it, or I'll just run to that exact same spot, 20 meters, 30 meters in the back half, down the wing, to the one side where everyone is. No one tries to move and be a dummy lead. We never tried it to go quick. Why not try? And this is something opposition always do to us, is have the mindset of, okay, and you can do this for some occasions when you know there's a scoring opportunity. It's, okay, 2 players go to the square, and it is a player gets the ball and immediately, as soon as they can, takes off 2-on-1, exploit that, get to the 40, and then launch. I don't know why we never seem to even try to go quick from a kick in. What is going on with our ball movement from D50 and why we're not trying anything different, Lockie?
Mate, I wish I had the answers. I share the same sentiment. I genuinely have nothing to add to that because it is the same story.
Is there anything around the ball movement that is worrying you right now?
Yeah, I mean that particularly as I watched the fourth quarter back, it was so like you used the word control earlier, like the lack of control that we had. That was just the word that was ringing in my ears the entire time. Every time we had the ball, we were flustered. We just looked like we had no confidence in our ability to transition the ball, which we know isn't necessarily our bread and butter anyway, but it was just so much even worse than usual. And the method, like if you want me to describe to you what the instruction is or whatever in that regard, absolutely no idea.
I just decision making all round and is poor. The more it happens, the more you start to think, is this coaching? Because surely if it keeps happening, some directive would go out there. As simple as, if you do this again, you're all going straight to the bench. Next guy that goes long down the line, percentage play, does not try to win this game of football, is off. Now, I understand when games are close that the long down the line percentage play can be an option you go towards.
Of course. Not saying to never do it.
Is it the right thing to do when you've only got one key forward, you don't have Harry out there as well, and then when the game's there to be won and you've tried doing the same thing 50 times and it hasn't worked and the ball just keeps coming back? There didn't even look like there was an attempt to find a short option. And I go back to when we've played our best football this year. It's ringing in my mind so much thinking about that Geelong game. It was this working to create short options, to stretch the opposition.
Yeah, absolutely.
It just wasn't there. It was just this safe, boring football. And you're just not going to win games if you continue to do this. And I don't know if as soon as a team puts pressure on us, mentally, at the moment, we just falter and go back to type and go back to that, whether Vossi's sitting there in the coach's box or, on the boundary line going, why are you doing this, boys? I keep telling you, tack the corridor, take the game on. Because it just wasn't there. Game's there to be won all last quarter, and we never wanted to try to win that game of football.
Yeah. How rarely do we, the risk-taking and biting off those things is one thing. How rarely do we even just safely try and chip it backwards and around? Those options are often there either. I don't know if my dad will be listening, but that's something that he often talks about. So often we're in that position where we get the ball and we're looking up the field and there's the long down the line options. And there's guys to our sides or back where, maybe it's not the most attacking option right now, but can we just hold the ball for a minute? We're always thinking it's all right, let's just ram it forward. And you mentioned that we have one key forward. Yeah, we had one key forward and a ruckman, both of them whose strengths are not pack marking. So we're not playing it to anyone's advantage by doing
that. It's baffling. And I love that you raised that point, because structurally it's very frustrating when you see opposition teams, and I go back to the kick-in element because this is where it's so evident. How many times do opposition teams, when they're trying to move the ball, have all their players, they might have them down one side, but then on the other side, it's I'm almost touching the boundary. And obviously we're going to potentially give you that kick because who needs it? But they kick it there, nail it, and then someone else has moved into some space and they just continually chip, and find and work their way through. We don't even try to stretch the opposition. Even if we know, okay, boys, plan A, long down the line, we don't create anything. As you're saying, a guy just stands in space and doesn't move. If we're trying to stretch the opposition, if they're running dummy leads, all of a sudden, if you keep getting into different space, does that trick an opposition defender into thinking, well, do I go with him? Because he's a little too wide. Yeah, I probably shouldn't worry about him. All you need to do is for him to go 3 steps forward and you could be out. But we don't try anything different. And in that last quarter, we just weren't smart. And it's crazy that I'm starting not to trust the players with ball in hand. That a month ago, if the ball could be in anyone's hands, and I'm saying, I'm so comfortable now. I know we're going to make the right decision, but there's indecisiveness when they've got it. Players don't seem to be working. There's no synergy between them. I don't know what's fallen off so much right now, but ball movement's disappeared. Midfield's disappeared. Those two things go, well, you just can't win games of football.
It's true. It's true. And it's the players moving in that scenario you talk about, but then it's also, the guy with the ball in hand. Because like I said, there was plenty of scenarios where I saw ways, and I know I'm not trying to make it seem like watching the game on TV is exactly the same as being the player on the ground with the ball. Like it's not that easy, but there's too many times where there are options to me, and then the decision is the poor one. So
yeah, and so much rushing as well, which feels to be such a strange thing that when we are getting our hands on the football, we're either going fast when there isn't an option and playing on and either getting ourselves into trouble, going, okay, sweet, take off and turning it over by foot, or, oh shit, there's actually no option. All of a sudden now the disposal's poor because you're under pressure. Or, and I don't know if you've noticed this, whether it's come across as much as it does at the ground, but I've noticed this weird pattern quite often. And I don't mind the idea of it, but when it's never seemingly working, why we keep doing it, I have no idea. But we'll take a mark, and there's this feigning to handball, feigning to play on. But the opposition, because it doesn't seem to ever work, maybe we're just not good at it. The opposition player just stands there, doesn't seem to care. You've wasted 10 seconds of potential options because you haven't even looked to actually play on or hit the target. So now everyone's manned up in the space. You don't have enough time to go back the 10 meters. So you now all of a sudden umpire's called play on and the opposition player's right at you. They're under pressure, turnover. This is a weird thing that I keep noticing. Have you noticed that at all? Is it an arrogance thing? I've no idea, but it just seems dumb that we're putting ourselves under so much pressure when we just don't need to.
Oh, mate, I'm starting to lose it with all of this. It's bad. Yeah, it's getting to that point where every little thing is irking us. Yeah, I got no answers.
I do have one other thing on, I guess, the ball movement and that being a bad issue. And maybe it goes to that Sard, trying to get the most out of him. I don't know if it's a solution. It's more, maybe it's an end of season thing. Not sure. But is some of it the fact that we maybe need another running defender to help Sard? I'm trying to look at who else we have in the makeup of this team now. Newman's not really that run and gun player. Chera was potentially meant to be that in the role he's played the last 2 weeks. He doesn't look like a guy that wants to explode, run quickly because of potentially that hamstring. Doesn't necessarily have that explosive pace to begin with. He's maybe that better user by foot player. Boyd's a great kick. He has some dash, but I wouldn't necessarily say he's that tuck the ball under the arm and run type player. It's probably what Zach Williams was meant to be. Now, he's obviously out injured, but his role is now down forward. Are we lacking the player that Zach Williams was meant to be down in defense? And not to be stupid, but is it as simple as the ball movement can be fixed if we had the player that when this, I guess, Voss era football was kind of built, we just haven't really replaced that Sard partner?
Very interesting thing to discuss, I think. Boyd, I mean, like I mentioned, I think the Boyd being in this back line over Chera is my favourite 7 that we can roll out there. Like the Cowan role, like is that somebody that needs to be more of a dasher, even though I really like Cowan in this team right now? I think it's a fair point from you, for sure.
And I don't know where that comes from. I don't know if that is when Zach Williams is fit, applying him back there, but something needs to be done about unleashing a guy like Sard right now because we're just not making it happen. And
Yeah.
we just cannot be doing the same safe ball movement when games are there to be won. It didn't work for us for the first half of last year. That was one of the things you could diagnose. It was just this boring, safe football. Need to take the game on. If we end up losing that game, Lockie, by 50 points because we keep trying to attack the corridor and there's players there trying to make it happen, are you that upset? Like, yes, you're going to be, but at least you can. I would rather sit here and say we tried to win that game of football than go, well, what did we do for a whole half of football? We had one center clearance, couldn't win it there. Absolutely got smashed in uncontested possessions for a half of footy. Couldn't get the ball inside 50. I mean, looking at some other stats here, if I can find them and where I've written them down on my spreadsheet. But, we had 11 less inside 50s. Big credit to Port. They controlled that territory game in the second half. And then just the lack of, front half pressure, which when this was working for us, we were like number one in bringing that front half pressure and scoring from it. We were one of the better sides. That's completely dropped off in this period. And a part of that clearly is not getting the ball inside 50 and keeping it in there. But I just don't know what's going on right now. We had 2 inside 50 tackles in the second half. So much of that is clearly down to the way clearly a lot of that is to how we're moving the ball. And when you're kicking it to Aliir every single time, you've got it. Obviously, a Fogarty can't do anything with that. So I'm not blaming necessarily the forward line for not bringing the heat. But what has changed that's not allowing us to do it? Because we only registered 7 inside 50 tackles. And I go back to what I said a few weeks ago. Before the GWS game, we averaged 14 inside 50 tackles per game. Since then, in the last 4 games, Lockie, we've averaged 6 inside 50 tackles. What is happening? We had 4 against GWS, 5 against the Dogs, 9 against North, 7 against Port. We're just not getting the ball in there enough and we're not being able to win that territory battle. I don't know what's changed because it was working so well for the previous month.
Yeah. I think where the ball is getting to inside 50 is just not allowing those guys to have the chance. Like if we're getting it in deep, then it's getting intercepted. And if we're getting it in shallow, then, what is that really? It's nothing.
And it's crazy because the last quarter, when we started to, for probably 5 minutes, start to get a little bit of control on the game and look maybe like we could attack something, it was these short kicks down the wing, trying to find the short option, lower the eyes, inside or just outside the forward 50. And then we never tried it again. It was, again, just this long bomb into the forward line, knowing that Charlie wasn't going to mark it. We would have been smarter. And I know this is, again, ridiculous, but it goes back to this. If Port are setting up and now they're expecting us to bomb it long and they've got their 2-on-1, key defenders down there to our Charlie. If they're expecting that, they're setting up for that. That's what's shifted things. Why not just kick it along the ground and have a panic ball inside 50 like Richmond did when they won?
It's not ridiculous.
If the last 5 times I've tried to kick it, it's been intercepted. What's the worst thing that can happen if you just grubble one along the ground and maybe try and get our smalls onto it, or at least just lower the trajectory of the ball where there's no way they can intercept that because it's so low out in front. It's just baffling that, again, decision-making or the actual planning is just not going our way. And it has to change, Lockie, right now. We cannot be doing what we've been doing for the last month if we want to make finals and make top 4.
It's true.
So I guess before we maybe try and find some positives out of this, I want to ask you a little bit of your thoughts around a rhetoric that's I've heard from a few people now, and I don't think they're intending it as an excuse necessarily, but it's got my blood boiling quite a lot anytime I hear it.
Okay.
So I want to know if you're as passionate about it as me, but are we struggling right now because we're coming up against teams that are fighting for their season at the moment? GWS, Dogs, and Port, they've all basically had to beat us to keep their finals hopes alive. There's this mentality that it's the first time in our this team right now, this generation of Carlton, this squad, they have been the team that is no longer trying to hunt. They're being hunted. It's a different mentality. Maybe we felt a bit happy. We had a few games that we could afford to lose sitting there in second spot, coming up against teams that are more desperate to win. Is it as simple as that? Because this is a rhetoric that I've started to hear that I definitely am quite negative on. So I'm keen to get your thoughts.
Yeah, well, I can definitely hear through your tone that it isn't one that resonates with you, and I'm keen to hear your thinking on that. I mean, yeah, it's interesting. I'm happy to hear out both sides of it. You think back to us last season, and when we turned it around, when basically every week the season was on the line for us, and that was obviously a positive thing. Yeah, I guess it's. Yeah, when is it a coincidence and when does it become, you see more of that, connection? I'm keen to hear from you why you're so negative on that theory.
Yeah. Well, I think the hunter-hunted kind of, I guess, mindset, it's a very interesting one because, we got to a spot second on the ladder, a few games separation, media starts saying you're a premiership favourite, those sorts of things. I don't at any stage think that we got ahead of ourselves. I think that's a poor phrasing to throw out there. Maybe other teams are seeing us more as a target, and so they're bringing a little bit more that way. But what have we, to go back to what we were maybe slamming Robbo for saying a few weeks ago, but like, what have we achieved to not think that we aren't a team that still needs to hunt others? And I think that's what I'm very frustrated and annoyed at in this sentiment, because I'm sick to death of hearing other teams are more desperate than we are right now. Oh, GWS, they need a win to keep their season alive. Oh, Doggies need a win. Otherwise, they won't make the top 8. Same as Port Adelaide this week. When the fuck are we actually going to be desperate? Seriously. Why are we not desperate to win games of football? We were second, fair enough. We had a few games in hand above the others. Look what happens when you're not desperate, Lockie. One more loss, we're out of the top 4. 2 losses, we're probably out of the top 8 and we won't play finals. That's how thin the difference is between everything right now. It's why I was so stern on we need to get wins now and keep that separation so the last few games this season, we don't have to worry about it. The time to get desperate was a month ago. I don't like hearing other teams are needing to win it. We need to win it. They're talking about winning to make the top 8 and maybe play a final. We're talking about winning a fucking premiership. Does that not mean more than just making finals and making up the numbers? Should we not be passionate about trying to make sure that every single game, okay, well, we've got to chase Sydney now. That's the benchmark. It wasn't as if we were top sitting pretty on top and the rest of the teams were below us and there was nothing to fight for. We still had a level to get to. So, yeah, I don't like this. There was no danger for us. So why turn up? The danger is where we sit right now. We've got Collingwood this week. All the goodwill that we built up over the last month prior maybe in the tunnel, teams start to think, shit, we're playing Carlton this week. We're coming up against, they're going to beat us in the midfield. Their tackle pressure's up. Defense, how are you getting it past Wiedering, McGovern? God, everyone, they're getting guys like Chincotta out of nowhere that are playing great. All of a sudden, no one fears us again. No midfields are coming up against us like North Melbourne. Like, to their credit, they've got a good midfield. But North are going into the games going, yep, we've got Carlton. Bring a bit of pressure and we're fine. We still don't have Collingwood's number, regardless of how poorly they're going this season. They're going to go into this game, Pendle's 400th, and go, how good's this? We think Carlton are shit. We think that they're mentally weak. We've shown it multiple times we've played against them. We're going to do it again. We've just burnt down all the strong mind games that we have built up, beating Geelong, beating Richmond, beating Port, beating those teams. All of a sudden, we're not feared again. There's no reason to fear us. And the time to get desperate was a month ago. If we're not desperate now, what the fuck are we doing?
So do you believe the rhetoric then, or not? That our mindset changed in terms of that hunted to huntee?
I don't necessarily think it has. My issue, I guess, around this is, I guess, from a fan perspective that I'm sick of hearing. I'm just sick of hearing this as some excuse like, oh, well, we're coming up against desperate teams. What the fuck are we doing if we're not desperate? And if that is seeping in, that we're not performing because we think we aren't desperate, then that is a whole nother, kettle of fish there that you're thinking, well, the time to get serious was a month ago. Now, lose this game against Collingwood, your season could be done. Because we know how important it was to finish top 4 and how important it was now that there's a lot of interstate teams around this to finish in that top 2 position. It's the worst time to be out of form. And it obviously can switch because at least to be on the positive side, the pressure started to switch around. I still don't think we're far off getting it right. But the margin for error now, we can't lose another game for the season if we want to win a flag. And I don't want to waste the season and the careers of these guys in form. And I know I'm going to go on another tangent and a bit of I don't know if it's necessarily a rant, but yes, success and progress isn't linear. There's a chance that this season we don't win the flag in whatever capacity that happens. Next year, we go on to win it. We win 2 in a row. I understand that can definitely happen. The worry and my concern around this is more the opportunity we've given ourselves to this point. There's no guarantee you do that again next year. Last season, we were frustrated in the fact that we kind of found out for the first time why top 4 means so much, why you need that home prelim. We did everything to give ourselves that platform for it. And it's all just disappeared. We've got a 3 to 4, 5 year window right now. I don't want to waste any of those years when the chance is there and it feels like we're on the precipice of wasting one of those. And then there's no guarantee that you're back in that position this stage next year.
Yeah, no, it's definitely true. It's fragile for sure. And at this point, I feel like if I'm trying to read between the lines of what you're saying, it's right now we look at this as every game matters and is crucial. And I hope that we were looking at that the same way a month ago, and we haven't put ourselves in this position without that mindset.
Definitely. Do you have any other thoughts on, I guess, maybe the bigger picture there, Lockie, on what each game is meaning to you right now and where things sit? Are you, I guess, we're going to do a bit more of the fixture reflection next week once we have finished our run of 3 games. But I guess that's probably, am I looking too much into the future and allowing that to dictate my emotions and how I'm seeing things? Where are you kind of trying to balance your outlook on the season and, I guess, compartmentalize, certain games and individualize them and not look at that bigger picture? Where are you settling with it all?
It's a really good way to phrase that question, I think, because I think a lot of this frustration is down to the fact that this is 4 weeks in a row of us feeling like this. I think we can excuse this more when it's a really good patch and then an off game, maybe 2. Like, I think that's part of it. Obviously, the latter is part of this frustration as well. Like, we were saying before we started recording, I think part of my glass half full approach is just that we just saw Sydney get pantsed at the place where they were supposedly never going to lose a game this season. So you cannot make a really strong case to me on why any team is far superior to us. With that said, it's also very hard to make a case for why we are necessarily that much better than anybody else either in that top 10 range, because the ladder doesn't lie, as they say. So it's a case for being optimistic and pessimistic. I can keep the faith because I'm so obsessed with this club and this team and I just think that we're better than everybody else anyway. But if you're being completely objective, how do you know how deep we're going to go this season?
And that's probably why I may be starting to lean on that negative side when I'm viewing this, because of just how tight things are and the fluctuations in form. You see on the weekend how many different teams can all of a sudden get an upset and maybe win one they shouldn't. It seems to happen each and every week. So I guess the positive side of that is it can all switch around very quickly, and all of a sudden we win the next 4 and, Brisbane and Freo lose some and we sit back in second spot. Clearly possible. No one is ruling that out right now. The worry is that now that we've lost that sort of advantage that we had on the ladder, we're not in that maybe Sydney position of you can kind of afford to lose a few and find your form while being so far ahead. We need to find it now. We can't afford to have that sort of trigger moment in 2 weeks' time. It has to be this week against Collingwood, and I hope it is. There's a chance it is. So with that being said, were there any positives that you can find from this game? Because I feel like I was a little bit uplifted with some of the things you were saying there, Lockie. So we've spoken about everything that was crap, clearly. Were there any little positives that you can kind of take? And maybe it's not even from this game, but it's things that are willing you towards that glass half full outlook for the rest of the last 4 games of this season.
I mean, an hour into this, I'm not going to be delving deep into these things because this has already been snapping. But I mean, for me, again, like I mentioned earlier about the midfield, we've seen it work in the past. So why can't it just turn around? I can't provide any kind of evidence behind these things apart from law of averages, the fact that things haven't been working out for us now, and I feel like they'll turn around. We've seen what these players can do when we're healthy and when the scenario is right. I think the only thing I'll maybe want to add on your discussion around like the ladder and things like that, I think if we think back to last year and what you said about the top 4 and everything like that, with this absolute clusterfuck of teams that we have right now, we feel that if we finish top 2 and we get that home final in the qualifying, you can make a really good case that we can beat any team, right?
Yes.
The playing field is evened up if we have to travel, if we have to win 4 weeks in a row. So I think that's like, for me, the core of like the frustration, which is that we feel like all we have to do to give ourselves the best chance is get that second position and be healthy. And right now we're losing both of those things, which is, I think, where all that desperation is. So you asked for positivity. I'm not giving it to you because that's not where we are this week. We'll do that next week after we win.
Well, I've surprisingly, for as, I guess, down on things that I've been, I do have a couple for you, Lockie. So hopefully an hour into this, now that we've got it all out of our system and we're going to try and start to be positive,
speak for yourself,
head into the next week, I'll throw a few things at you. And this is literally for the sake of trying to be positive and stay up and about.
You're going to get rebutted, but go ahead.
Exactly. Well, firstly, we've touched on it, but I think I was happy to at least see pressure back and the hunger and intent to chase, tackle. That's what got me out of my chair on Friday night. I was excited for those little moments. It got the crowd into the game. Clearly, not everything is there. And at this stage, standards are higher. You can't just have 1 out of 4 of your key pillars firing. You need all 4. But compared to the last 3 weeks, I feel like we were starting to get a few of those elements back. So there is at least it was better than it has been. There's something that looks like it is improving. And I guess, like you're saying, it's tangible that we've seen everything else work. So it doesn't feel like the shift between where we are now and back into that top 2 being potentially even, not maybe ladder position, but number 1 team in the competition on form, knowing Sydney's not amazing. Freo are back in 3rd, but can you trust them? 1 week they're great, 1 week they're not. At least we're going through a patch where we're garbage completely. We can switch that around. And I guess on that, I heard this, and I can't remember who I heard it from. So big shout out to them if they're listening, and you've had this point of view because it was most likely from yourself. But it was that a positive is that we're going horrifically over this last 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Haven't lost by a lot. We've still really been in these games with a few minutes to go. Clearly, the floor between, our worst is rising. That gives me some hope in the glass half full approach that we're not getting belted, a few adjustments, and we're at least back to winning. It might not be premiership form, but it'll at least get you the chocolates in some of these games. So, look, we're both going to be here trying to keep the faith as much as possible. Each game I'm going to go in thinking we can win it. Maybe it isn't as far off as we think it is. I guess the issue comes back to it just needs to change now. And I think my last positive, which I don't know if this came across on the TV, but I have to give a massive shout out to all the fans that were at the game, because I don't think I've ever seen us as a collective try to will a team on to win more than in that game.
Wow.
Last quarter, there were moments where Port had sort of kicked a goal. I think it was the one where they finally got the lead, and like 5 Port supporters that were there started, making some noise. Carlton cheer squad, Carlton fans around the ground started to try and get up and about, try to give some noise and say, no, boys, this is yours. You can get this done. Yep. That happened a fair few times in that last quarter. There were moments where we started to, whether it was getting a nice mark in the back line, it was this, okay, let's go now. Let's launch. Let's get around you, boys. We'll bring the noise. We want you to win this game. And ultimately, it doesn't happen. But I've seen us as a supporter base probably, and fair enough, go into our shells, myself included, when things aren't working. So I did want to give that a bit of a shout out, because I was very pleased that we were that team that went, look, all we can do in the stands is make some noise. Let's try and do it. So big shout out to that.
I like that. You put your hand up. You said that you were quiet in recent weeks. So I'm glad to see that you've lifted and the boys will get behind you.
Yes. So Lockie, I feel like I should have panned to this way earlier in this episode because we've almost covered every little detail, but grill the corner. The questions from the fans on Twitter and Instagram. What do the lovely people have for us this week?
Well, we are a long way into this episode, so I want the absolute rapid fire from you. And I think these questions will allow that. So we're talking succinct. From Damo, who was missed more, Mackay, Akers, or TDK?
That would be Harry Mackay, 100% forward structure. I think clearly lacked. And just the second ruck, which could be an issue again this week.
I agree. From Will, why aren't Boyd and Binsey playing?
Boyd, don't know. I was surprised about that. I think they're trying to play Chera because whether they want him in form, like you're saying, they just want him somewhere. Bins, big. I've seen a lot of people say we should have played Bins this week, particularly with Akers out. This is probably going to be the most, if someone's watching this, they'd want to absolutely slap me in the face because I'm coming off as a smug prick. But I think a lot of people that want Bins in haven't watched Bins play the VFL this year.
Right.
That's my strong opinion. I just haven't seen a lot from him this year. I think his defensive side hurts him. And if that's maybe an issue with the slight body of, Ollie Hollands, you're going to get that 100 times worse with Bins. Right. Similar body size, but not as defensive. Had a really good game against Collingwood, got 47 touches, 3 goals.
Yep.
Collingwood's VFL team have the bloke behind the bar at your local pub playing for him. They had absolutely no one out there. Apart from that, I don't think he's played enough good games. Do you reward someone off one game or a body of work? I'd say body of work, and I'm also not trusting a guy who has not really played a game of AFL football in a crunch time game against Port. I'd love to see Binsey at some stage, but not now from what I've seen. But feel free to disagree with me and slap me in the comments.
No, I like it. Very good answer. From Thomas, what is the right midfield mixture? Who should be thrown into the mix? We talked about this a bit earlier, but if you tried to summarize it, or I guess maybe thinking about next week.
Well, the players are there. Cripps, Walsh, Chera, Hewitt, Kennedy, use them. As I alluded back to, it was very bizarre to me, particularly, I guess, Kennedy. I thought he was one of our better players out there on the night, and we just did not try him in the middle. I know he's been thrown around doing a whole bunch of other roles, but he's in my midfield mix right now. I think he's in form. He gets the ball moving. You know he's going to give absolutely everything. Why there was no attempt really at, Cripps, Hewitt, Kennedy, like, let's just try and get the big bullies around the ball when we need to win one. I don't know. I'll be trying that. And if Chera's going to be in the team, he's not playing halfback for me. It's a wing mid rotation with probably Walshy.
Mm-hmm. I like it. I've got one more question here, but I'd like us to do our votes before I let us wrap up with this one, so you can get philosophical.
Easy. Can I ask you a question that I have found in our DMs from the great Alex Reeves? Because I do really like this. Obviously, he asked here, no Harry and De Koning. Charlie was double teamed quite a lot in the forward line. Is there anything else that you would have done in the sort of forward line to sort of change our structures? I'd like that as a question. We maybe haven't touched on that a lot. Clearly an issue with the way we move the ball as well. What would you have done in that sort of forward line? Any kind of changes?
I don't think there would have been structural or personnel changes that I would have made. I think it was far more about the method that we went about things, whether that was doing whatever was possible to try and do more short kicking, handball, overlap, riskier kicks, safer kicks, anything that wasn't sitting on those guys' heads, personally.
Yeah. I mean, one thing, and again, it's that strange component of, do you take Cripper out of the midfield when he's the only midfielder firing and chuck him forward for 5 minutes and see if that can do anything?
So he can get contested marked on?
Yeah, I don't know. Is that something where you're at least trying something so he can sit back at the end of the game and go, they attempted something? Maybe I wouldn't have liked that, considering he's the key to our midfield right now, the number one winner in that area. Probably not. I think Kempy probably would have been the only switch I would have made, but I don't know. We probably just weren't in that position that late, knowing, okay, well, it has to be Lewis Young. He's the only one you can bring in to bring some ruck relief and a taller body. I agree with you. I think it's probably a bit more of the ball movement and trying to stretch teams by actually using that, and probably just not, putting Fogarty around the ball at stages, like keep him in the forward line when you need him to bring that pressure. I didn't like him sort of moving up at stages.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
But is it vote time? Navy, blue corner, blue bagger, badge of honor. Lockie, you're 3-2-1 this week.
I've gone Kerno 3, Kennedy 2 as my exceeding my expectations, and Weeders 1.
Yeah, gone very, very similar. I've gone Charlie with the 1 vote. Thought he was much improved this week.
Yes.
Said before the game, maybe without Harry, this is kind of the kick up the bum he needs just to, he was playing at 80%. You know what I mean? We were harsh on him because he's still playing decent footy, but we knew there were just those few little things that he needed to tweak. That little bit of more competitiveness one-on-one. Saw that in spades this week. Felt it at the ground. Charlie gets the 1. 2 goes to Kennedy. Thought he was just incredible. That back with the flight mark and then goal was unbelievable to see at the ground, seeing, him just running the whole way. Oh, what a player. Absolutely love what I'm seeing from Kennedy at the moment. He gets the 2. And then my 3 votes went to Mitch McGovern. I thought down back, he was that real interceptor. Some of the pressure acts higher up the ground, getting those spoils. Thought he was incredible. You could tell, particularly in that first half, the difference he made. The amount of times I was just making comments of, God, this is what we missed last week, not having Mitch McGovern out there. Thought he was great. But yeah, I think Wiedering definitely was someone probably stiff not to get a vote for me. But Lockie, the last question to rattle and finish this episode off.
From Donna, do you still have hope that we make the grand final? Well, it's all about at the end of the day.
Yeah. Not as much hope as I had a month ago, but until it's mathematically impossible, there's always going to be hope there. I still think our best is good enough. I still think our best players are good enough. The thing that probably gives me some hope in us being out of form right now is seeing Sydney out of form as well. The two teams that a month ago looked like they were the best by the length of the Flemington Strait are now struggling. What is that? It's both teams. Are we trying different things? Is it those heavy training loads, different things like that? Is it a coincidence? Is it an actual tangible thing that makes sense because we both were firing? I have no idea. The fact that they're poor at the moment and anyone can kind of beat anyone gives me that little light inside. I guess to be that negative factor of it, I just need to see it right now. I am probably harsh on things and not as optimistic as I maybe would have been last year because the standards have shifted and I can't just sit here and be happy with, oh, the pressure was good this week. Oh, well, we're still top 4. Destiny's still in our hands. I need to see it week in, week out now because I want to win the flag. I don't just want to make finals. But of course, we can still do it. Lockie, what's your big optimistic take to finish this episode? I can't wait to hear it.
I mean, I definitely don't feel the hope that was there 5 weeks ago. 5 weeks ago, Essendon had no way of not making top 4. And now they might not even play finals. So we know that so much can change in that period of time. So I'll put my flag in the ground here and say that it's the end of round 20. And I definitely see a world where in 4 weeks' time, we're going into finals feeling really, really confident. So let's see if that plays out.
No, I love it. I mean, this team, if any team can go through adversity when things aren't working right and get it done, it's these guys. If you want that glass half full take, Lockie, last year we needed to win every single game just to make finals. This time, it's win every game to maybe make top 2, to definitely make top 4. I'd much rather be in this situation than the situation we were in last season, form permitting. Very true. Why not? Let's absolutely have a crack at this. It's not all bad, but it needs to change very quickly. So let us know your thoughts on everything that we've covered in the comments below if you're watching this on YouTube. If you just want to vent, go for it. If you disagree with anything that we've said, which you're probably going to disagree with me on a few things, but absolutely go for it. Let's have a conversation in the comments about it. It's not about who's right. It's just about starting a bit of a discussion and talking about it all, because I know we're all feeling a little bit down on things. So maybe we can find some positive aspects. And if you're listening to this in audio form, head over to the socials at Navy Blue Corner. And we'll be back this Wednesday night on Blue Abroad, 8 p.m. for preview show against the Pies. I assume by then we'll be nice and positive and ready to launch into that game. It's going to be a massive one. Cannot wait. Up the bloody baggers. See you guys next time.